Hey, everybody! It's Paul Grossman, the Dark Arts Wizard of Test Automation. And again, I welcome you to our first meetup with Zappeltech for our Test Automation meetup with two of the best, brightest minds in test automation here this wonderful Wednesday morning here in the U.S. States over here. I've got two fantastic guests for you guys. In about an hour, we're going to be speaking to a close personal friend, Mary Jo Zervas. I worked with her over at Redbox, and she currently works for Paylocity. And she's going to be talking to us about how to build a framework using SpecFlow for UI and app testing. In case you're not sure what SpecFlow means, if someone asks you about SpecFlow, it means that they're asking you if you can write Gherkin and Cucumber in C# rather than Java. So little interview tip for there if you ever hear the word SpecFlow coming up. We also have Anand Bagmar from Applet Tools, and he's going to be talking to us about the missing tip of test automation, of the automation pyramid, which is visual validation, which is something that is really cool. And Applet Tools has really done a fantastic job of making this a really usable part and tool on the whole thing. So let's see. I'm looking at, and by the way, I do have to mention, while we've got the conference going on and you're watching this, I appreciate everybody coming. You can ask questions. In fact, you might have seen just Raul Dominguez. I'm going to apologize for messing up your name, Raul. And they're all saying good morning over there. So they're actually asking questions. You can ask questions up on the LinkedIn if you're watching from there, or if you're watching from the YouTube link, you can ask there. I'm seeing all these good mornings and hellos and things. Thank you so much, Raj. I appreciate that. And Sonia, you too. Let's see. What other things do I have to cover? This is our first conference for 2023. And we're looking forward to doing some more of those. We've already got more speakers lined up for the next event in March. So stick around, and we're going to have a whole lot of fun. I think let's see. I do want to again thank Zappeltech for hosting these conferences. I think I covered the questions. And by the way, I got to give a shout out to our backstage boss, Daniel, who's been handling all of the technical stuff that goes on to put these shows on. And he deserves a round of applause. I will do a round of applause because I don't have a sound effects board over here. So I think, Daniel, we will go and bring Anand Bagmar up, and we'll start talking about visual validation, missing tip of the automation pyramid. And I see Anand's out there. You're welcome. You're welcome, Daniel. I see some stuff over there. Anand, how are you doing today, sir?
Hey, Paul. I'm great. How are you? How's everyone? Great to be on this platform. Starting off the year, as you said, it's really excited to be out here, and thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for accepting the invite over here. I'm doing great. I don't know if anyone remembers from our December meeting. I was looking for a job, and today I have one. So I'm all thumbs up and happy. And in fact, I do have to give a shout out to some of my coworkers who are probably watching on the video right now because I shared the link to them. So those are my friends over at Freight Verify. So they are an awesome team, and I can't say enough about them. They're just terrific. So that's my company plug. Anand, I'm going to switch it over to you. You can take over and give us your presentation. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul, and the team to make this happen. Hello, everyone. As Paul mentioned, I'm Anand Bagmar. And before I start talking, I always forget to do this. One would have thought that after all these years of COVID and lockdown, you would remember to share your screen. Hopefully, my screen is visible now. And Let's get started. So, I'm Anand Bagmar, and today I will be speaking with you about visual validation, the missing tip of the automation pyramid. A little background about myself: I've been working with Tools now for the past 4+ years. I've been in the testing space, or rather, I started testing more than 20 years ago, but very quickly I graduated to thinking about it as quality and not just testing. And that is a very big difference in my mind, because testing is a testing team activity in various ways. But when you start thinking about quality, all different roles need to start collaborating and doing their bit to help build a quality product. So I've been part of this quality space now for more than 20 years, worked in various organizations around the world, product and services. I'm a contributor on the open source community side as well, including Selenium and various other open source tools. And with Tools, my role is of a senior solutions architect and a quality evangelist. That's enough about me. I would love to continue this conversation with you even after this particular conversation. My Twitter is mentioned on the screen. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. And I really hope to connect with you and take this discussion forward. But today it's about visual uh, validation and why it is the missing tip of the automation pyramid. So let's go on a journey to understand what that means. Okay. If I ask you this question, how would you test a pen? What are the different things you would think of? Does it write? Does the cap fit properly? Does it look good? Is there any ink leakage or something? How long can you write with it? Standard scenarios or test cases that you can think of for a pen. But is that sufficient? Is that right, that we are testing the pen after it has been assembled? When in reality, the pen is made of many different components. Now, if you had an idea about these components, you would think about, does the cartridge fit the body of the pen correctly? Because if that itself is loose, then there is going to be leakage, ink leakage. Or is the cartridge of the right size? If it is too long, then it is not going to fit the base of the pen, or rather, the pen will not be assembled properly. So, what that means is, if you test early, you could prevent a lot of problems that you may find later on, and you can help fix it well in time before more damage is done. Why is that important? When we are working on software, and that software could be websites or native apps, it could be anything for that matter, right? Desktop applications as well. And software is complex. It might be a very simple screen that we see on the that is presented to the user, but it is complex. It has a lot of complex architecture, a lot of different components in the backend that need to speak properly with each other, and only then the user is going to get the functionality that is expected. Now, if you have to test this early, what is really missing here? We know this is a standard set of activities that you would do on this type of product, right? Or what are the different types of tests you will have, when you will test it, how you will test it. But there's something missing over here. And that part is, how is your screen really getting rendered? What was working well before continues to work now as well as your product evolves. The typical testing approach that we have for this type of solution is of the nature, or is of the type of spot the difference. What does that mean? If I show you these two images side by side and ask you, I'm going to wait for a few seconds and see how many differences you can find between these images. Okay, let's look at the answers. Did you find all four differences in this short span of time. Maybe some people did, maybe some people did not. It takes time, right? Let's take another example. How many differences do you see over here? Okay. Did you find all these differences? Now, I could have missed out on some differences for that matter as well, right? Because this is a very manual activity. It depends on how well you really understand this, how much time you have to look at these as well. But that typically is our approach to testing. To help make things easier, we automate our tests as much as we can. And this automation, we can think about it as a test pyramid, which gives us a visual way to think about what are the different types of tests you want to automate, at what layer, how many tests should be there, what type of feedback is expected from them, what is the value you expect out of these tests as well. This is a very known thing, so I'm not going to speak more about the pyramid, about the value of the pyramid itself. But if someone wants to know more, I would be happy to have a separate offline discussion with you to talk about that. Now, a simplistic view is there are three types of tests in this pyramid, but if you go a level deeper, you will notice that the web service actually can be split into various different types of tests at that level itself. And likewise for UI and end-to-end tests also, you can have different categories over there or break it down in a better fashion to get better and faster feedback, very focused type of testing done at those layers. But that is your test automation pyramid. And we sort of understand this as a team. We are working towards implementing different types of tests to test the functionality, what we are building, and we hope that everything is fine. This automation also, of course, includes non functional requirements as well: performance, security, accessibility, analytics, and there could be many more depending on context of your product. The part that still remains to be done, though, is the manual and exploratory bit. You still have to repeat this activity on every major release or change that happens in your product, at least, if not more often. And that can be delaying your release process, or it might also be a error prone activity because you're repeating the same type of tests for every different cycle that you have. And this approach, it is error prone because we sort of approach it like this puzzle spot the difference itself. So again, let's look at an example. If I show you these two images, how many differences do you find over here? I'll again wait for a few seconds. But wait a minute. This is not actually how we test, is it? What we test is we have one image, which is what is our expected functionality of the product. This could be in form of a requirements documents, PRDs, or design documents, whichever form we have that is applicable for your product. But we get this requirement document, we understand it well. Based on that, we create our approach to testing. We'll start creating a test strategy, test, identify the test scenarios, maybe start doing automation upfront as well, while the developers are implementing the functionality. So we know what is expected. And then when the build actually comes to us for testing, we get a new image of how the screen is rendered. And now tell me, how many differences did you find between those two images? This is what is rendered as a delivered product to you for testing. How many differences do you see over here? I could find at least 5, 6 differences, but I actually missed, because this is a much more high resolution image, I missed some of the details over here. For example, there's one aspect that is missing over here in terms of the difference that is seen. This is the approach that we take for testing. Though this example is of images, We will see similar examples in our software products as well. For example, and I've got a ton of examples, Instagram, a native application, you see this weird rendering that has happened. Twitter, UPS, the app works great on a phone, but on a tablet, it renders very weirdly. A website, a news media website, in the browser in this case, or e commerce, where the CSS is broken, banking website, airlines. And I've got many different examples of airlines now that travel has started. Again, I've seen a lot of these issues in the products. The problem is that because of our approach to testing, and for that matter, you take any of these examples, in most cases, your functional automation is going to continue to work fine because we rely on locators and we've got intelligent locators, and it's going to find that element that you need to interact with, do the action on that, and proceed. But clearly, the look and feel is broken over here. In many cases, you would not even be able to click on those. Your test also might fail because the screen is not being rendered correctly. So, the challenge over here is that defects still escape to production, and they escape to production because our approach to testing is incorrect. We are implementing tests or we are writing tests based on what we expect to see. But what about the unknown that our test is not looking at right now? That is a big gap in our testing approach. Also, all of these issues would have been caught if you are doing your manual testing well. Your automation has worked, but you still need to go and explore the application and make sure everything is still working fine. Rendering is happening correctly. So, all of these issues could have been found manually as well. But do you really have the luxury of time? That is the problem. Our approach to testing is incorrect, and maybe incorrect is a very strong word. It is definitely not adequate. We need to get better. And that is what we are going to talk about for rest of the session. How can we get better at this? So instead of playing this game of chance and hope that our automation catches these types of issues, what can we do different at the top of this pyramid? The missing piece is the visual testing piece. How can we incorporate visual testing, which not just validates the look and feel and the user experience, but can it also do more and work in a way that will help us continue on our CI/CD journey in a seamless, in fact, a more optimized and better way? We understand, hopefully, based on the prior examples, if visual testing is not done, it will definitely lead to a loss of revenue. It will lead to brand and credibility loss. This is the age of social media. Anything goes wrong, we are all over social media trying to raise awareness, trying to complain about it, trying to get a resolution to the problem. But as a result of putting it out there, it can be perceived negatively as well. And there is a brand and credibility loss for that particular product and organization. A bigger challenge also is going to be you might end up losing your users. If I'm trying to purchase a flight ticket and if that website is not working correctly, I would not be very comfortable purchasing a ticket from that website. Instead, I will go to some other website and purchase the ticket from there. So I've lost my user, I've lost revenue, and my credibility is also suffering. This is a problem. So this is where visual testing can help, right? And if you, this is based on Wikipedia. What is visual testing? It's validating the visual aspects of whatever the screens are rendered, the layout, appearance, making sure each and every aspect of the UI is as expected as per design. Now, this is a very old definition as well, 2013. We are almost 10 years beyond this point now. Let's see what has changed as well in this time. So, if we go a little bit deeper into what is visual testing, typically it is done manually. You will play the spot the difference type of puzzle, understand how your product is evolving, and try and correlate with what is expected from your memory, or you have to switch context, look at the documents again to ensure everything is fine. So it is mostly done manually, and because of that, it is also resulting in a lot of challenges, like it is a very tedious activity, it is very error prone, it is impossible to scale and repeat in the age of CI CD, and that's a big problem. Now, the existing functional automation tools may help, but that is a little bit more than what it can do, right? But you will not be able to get all the differences, all the impact of the changes which are not meeting your criteria, meeting your baselines, meeting your expectations. Not everything will be possible using the traditional automation tools. So, what is the solution? If manual testing is not going to work, the solution is, of course, we need to try and automate it, right? Any repeated activity, that is the power of automation. Remove the same repeated activities, or avoid having to do the same repeated activities, automate those, and get the feedback from the machines and take decisions based on the results that you see. So, how does this work? The first step is, of course, to create baselines. You need to have what is the expected behavior of your product available to the tool. So you create a baseline by taking screenshots of the expected UI. Then, when you run the test against a new build, you will take the same screenshots again, and you will compare those screenshots with the baselines that you had captured earlier. And if there's any difference, you would want to be known about it, informed about it. Now, these screenshots that you're trying to compare can be for the whole page, it can be for snippets of the page as well, because maybe the whole page is not of interest, only a small portion of the page is of interest to me. A very important aspect is also about your product is a living and breathing product. It is going to continue to evolve and change. New features will be added. And as your product evolves, you would need to update different portions of your baselines, either all or a few of the baselines, depending on the nature of change, as your product is evolving, to keep it in sync with what the expectation is. So, these are at a very high level how visual testing is going to work. Create the baseline, do the comparison when you run the test, and of course, as your product evolves, update the baselines as well. But this also is challenging. It is not as easy as it looks. Why? Because the comparison itself can potentially have a lot of false positives or negatives. The baseline creation and maintenance could become a very tedious activity. Especially a lot of open source tools, you need to manage this activity on your own. Creation of baseline and maintaining that. Why is creation and maintenance a challenge? Because you need to think about different browsers. Now, browsers, even though they are W3C compliant, they still control how the rendering of the page needs to be done. That means a page may not look exactly the same on different types of browsers. There might be some subtle differences, which might mean you need to create different baselines for different browsers. You could be working on devices, which means there are hundreds and thousands of types of devices. Depending on the devices that are interest to you, you would need to create the baselines for those as well. And this is based on different resolutions and viewport sizes. So in the laptop, I'm using a 13-inch Mac Pro, but now we've got a 14-inch Mac Pro as well. Earlier we had 15-inch, and now we've got 16-inch as well. So there are different size browser windows that will be there, and you have to create baselines for each of these different combinations independently. Otherwise, you are trying to compare two different types of apples with each other. They are different. You cannot compare a red apple with a green apple. It is not going to be the right comparison for you. So you have to create and maintain baselines for all of these independently. And when you run the test, doing the result analysis and identifying next steps, what you need to do to fix those problems if there were any differences found, that is also a big challenge with all this information that you're getting. And this becomes more of a challenge because our products are very dynamic, right? Now, here are some different types of examples of products. And these are just websites, but native apps also come into the picture over here. And with these types of products, as your product evolves, you need to keep updating your baselines. There could be new features that you are implementing. The functionality could be different. There could be personalization on the pages. There could be contextual data on the page. There might be A/B experiments that you're running in your product as well. There might be feature toggles that you might be having in your product. There could be so many different combinations of the similar type of functionality that the user is using based on which are the different types of users. You want to do visual validation for all these important combinations automatically. How is your automation tool going to be able to support these? You really need to think about those. And because of these reasons, because your product is a living and breathing product, pixel comparison just cannot work for you. Browser based rendering differences is one classic example why pixel comparison cannot work. But with contextual data, real time data, or personalized data, dynamic data, whether it's web or native apps or desktops or images or PDF documents, it does not matter. With pixel comparison, that's always going to be a challenge. You will end up getting a false comparison. Here is an example of a particular page where if I do a pixel comparison, I see a full screen as highlighted as differences. But if I use AI based comparison, then only the relevant changes are highlighted over here. So then, if these are the challenges of visual test automation, what is the solution to this? The solution is not just think about this as visual test automation or visual testing. We need to start seeing how AI can bring power and true value to this type of testing. We need to think about this as visual AI, not just as visual testing. And with visual AI, this means it's not just about visual testing, but how can you make your functional testing more powerful and in the process also add visual testing aspects to this automation. That is what we are really talking about over here. So it's combining functional and visual testing together. That is what visual AI is. And for this, I want to speak about how Applitools Visual AI and Applitools Ultrafast Cloud truly add great value to teams where they see such type of challenges, such type of functional and visual issues escaping into production, which impacts the brand, revenue, and users as in the process. So, Visual AI, Applitools is the creator of Visual AI, and the technology, the way it is built, it simplifies your functional testing tremendously. Instead of writing a lot of validations, so now this is an example of a Cypress test where you're still using Cypress to implement your or test your functional flow. All the navigations, actions are done using Cypress, but then you're writing a lot of code to do the validations. Instead of that, with Visual AI, you can replace all the validations with a single call to Apply Tools and get the functional and visual validation done in one call. In addition, instead of having very specific type of validations, which is a traditional approach, with the visual AI approach of Apply Tools, you are able to get the full screen validation as well. So it's not just testing for very specific type of uh, assertions, or not having very specific type of assertions in your code. You are also now able to check for things that you might not even be aware of, but which might not be working as expected in your product. A single call can test the whole screen very easily. So Visual AI simplifies functional testing. Visual AI also handles dynamic content, which is a very important aspect. With the AI algorithms, you could choose, and you could choose to have a combination of these algorithms, as we'll see shortly in the demo as well, where you can see these uh, how the AI algorithms can work with dynamic content. Visual AI can also work with shifting content, where in long pages, because of some small changes in your screen, the whole page appears to shift. And because of this, you end up getting a lot of false positives in your validations. With Visual AI, you will be able to focus only on specific aspects of the screen which have genuinely changed and ignore the shifting content. And that can add a huge value to your automation. Scaling is another very important aspect of our functional testing, especially because we want to make sure our product is usable on all the different supported browsers and devices that the users would be using, or users would be accessing our product from. A typical approach is to run the same set of tests on different set of browsers or devices, essentially run the same test n number of times. If I have 100 tests and 4 browsers, I'm ending up to running 400 tests to get the feedback from your automated tests about the functionality. But why do you need to run the same test so many times? With the ultra fast test cloud, you would run the test just once and get the feedback from all the different supported browsers and devices automatically at the cost of running just a single test. So you're getting huge coverage by using Visual AI. You're getting increased seamless cross browser, cross device coverage by using the ultra fast test cloud. And everything is happening by running the test just once. And you could run that test once on your machine or your CI machine, and you will still get the same type of results. Let's look at a demo what this really means. What I have right now is my Apply Tools dashboard on the left hand side, I've run a certain set of tests. This is what we call as batches. Batches is something, it's your suite of tests that you have run, your smoke, sanity, regression, whichever way you want to organize this. In here, on the right hand side now, you will see a summary of all these different tests that I've executed. And from a visual AI perspective, what was the result of those executions? This can give some interesting trends based on the execution that has happened, which can give you insights on certain aspects which is working well or not working well at all based on context of what different tests have run. You could group it based on OS, browsers, viewport sizes, devices, and various different ways. You would also notice that there is a pass and there is unresolved. There is no failed over here. And that's a very important distinction, and it's a very conscious choice of why Apply Tools does this. I'll explain that in a little bit. If you go to the details view, this is where you will see each test that has executed as part of this batch. And over here, you'll be also able to see its status, the name of the application, test, OS, browser, and this is a configurable field. You can choose what all information you want to have over here or not. Let's take a closer look at some examples. We'll start with a passing test. This is a media website where I don't need any tool to tell me that both of these images look different. On the left hand side is my baseline, what is the expected state. On the right hand side is the screenshot or the checkpoint that was captured as part of this test running. I'm comparing this checkpoint with the baseline and I want to know if there are any differences over here. But this test was marked as passed. If I toggle between the baseline and the screenshot that was captured, everything is different. Then how did this test get passed? That is because we used a layout algorithm, which is an AI algorithm, which says, I don't care about any content differences. As long as the structure of my page is as expected, this test is passed for me. So if I do not have control over the data that is coming into my application, the minimum that I can do is make sure that data is not breaking the structure of my page. And that's why this test is marked as passed, because even though the content is different, the structure of my page is the same. What would happen if we want to compare the content as well? If I now choose to compare it using a strict algorithm, which is a very, very powerful AI algorithm, this algorithm says anything that is different to the human eyes, show that as a difference to me. And in this case, if I again overlay the baseline and the screenshot together, you would notice anything that is different to the human eye has been highlighted as a difference over here. So now the strict algorithm is saying the header, logo, everything is fine, but everything is different over here. Now, the differences could be related with data, content, images, anything. Does not matter. You will be seeing those as differences. What would happen if you do a pixel comparison? So if I use an exact algorithm, which is a pixel matching algorithm, you see that almost the whole page is highlighted as a difference over here, including the logo and the header, even though we could not see any difference over here. But there were some minute pixel level differences which we were not able to notice. But at a pixel level, there were differences, and the tool is highlighting that for you. So even for aspects where there should have been no differences, I'm now seeing differences found because I'm using a pixel comparison algorithm. So this is why pixel comparison does not work. This is one example why pixel comparison just does not work. But because we originally started comparing this with a layout algorithm, this test was marked as passed. Let's look at another example. This case, it's a native app example, Yahoo Finance app. And this was done, comparison was done using strict. Hence, anything that is different to the human eyes is highlighted as a difference over here. But now you might say, I don't have control over the data that comes in over here. So do I use layout for the whole screen? Well, that is one option, but maybe strict algorithm is the right algorithm for this page or this screen. But certain section or certain region of the screen, you don't have control over the data. Only that section or that region you could mark in the layout algorithm. And now you saw how much the pink area has reduced because of this. And with the layout algorithm as well, now you are able to see there's a genuine defect that is caught by the test using Apply tools. There is some content inside this green label or this green box that is missing, as compared to the baseline. And this is a difference of content missing versus a different content. Applitools because is highlighting only the area where the content is missing. And that is a very huge value add. Now, this particular screen is being compared using two different algorithms, strict and layout. And you could add more of these regions, as many as you need for that matter. There's another very interesting thing that we could use. You could also ignore certain regions from comparison. So if I ignore this region, that will not be included in the comparison at all. This is a very good case, for example, if your product is going to show ads or videos which you don't really care about. So you're just going to ignore it from comparison. So now in this particular example, I have three different algorithms being used in combination to test this particular screen. Because there were some differences found, Applitools marked this as unresolved. There is some mismatch that was found, hence it is unresolved. Applitools does not know, is this change that you are seeing, whatever differences are highlighted, is this an expected change or an unexpected change? Expected change would be when your product has evolved and your screen in turn has evolved because of that. So now your baseline needs to evolve also. Or these are actual defects that has been a defect that has been found, which means you need to report a defect and you need to fail the test. So Applitools does not know what is right or wrong, but Applitools can tell you with 99.49% accuracy if there is a difference on the screen found or not as compared with the baseline. You as a team member would know what is different about this build. Is this new functionality or is this a regression that is found? And you will come and take a decision. So if you're running hundreds of tests, you only need to look at the test which has a difference found. Applitools will present the difference to you. You quickly looking at the context will take a decision on those and move forward. If there are no differences found, that means the test is passing, it's green. You don't even need to look at it because everything is working fine. Now, in this particular case, there seems to be a defect that is found. And if you have a defect management tool integrated with this, for example, Jira integrated with Applitools, you could directly create a defect in Jira right from here. And at this point, you're going to do a thumbs down. When you do a thumbs down, now you will see this test is marked as failed. However, if these whatever differences that you found, they are acceptable differences because your product has evolved, and that is how it's going to be in the future. Instead of a thumbs down, you do a thumbs up. When you do a thumbs up, now it has been marked as passed. As a team member, you are coming and taking a decision on this. So what we have seen so far is you're using a combination of algorithms to get the best value of your product or testing your product quality. Also, what we saw as part of these examples, you can do the same thing on web or native apps as well. Here is also an example of PDF document validation. Same algorithms will work for PDF as well. If a PDF has got 4 pages in this case, as in this case, there'll be each page will be considered as a separate screenshot and comparison will happen accordingly. But it's the same algorithms that can work across for PDF documents as well. There are many more interesting use cases. For example, if you want to test localization, is the structure of my page remaining the same even for different languages? So a login screen for Facebook in different languages. I unfortunately do not know both of these languages, but I'm still able to do testing on those to make sure at least My product is working correctly. I cannot read the content and validate if that part is correct, but at least is the structure of my page the same? My structure is not getting broken with a new build that has come across. Now, with the layout algorithm, there is a difference found over here. This content in the baseline was expected to go beyond the text box. In this case, it is not. So it is highlighting that as a difference. If I use a strict algorithm over here, you see each and every aspect of the screen where there is a language difference is highlighted over here, because that's what strict is going to tell for us. You'll also be able to see long pages. I mentioned about the shifting content, right? So this can lead to a lot of false positives. These types of differences will not be meaningful to the team at all. So you could hide the differences caused by displacement because of some small changes happening in your page. But as a result, the whole page gets shifted. And when it does the processing of that long page, ignoring all the displacement related differences, you will notice the number of pink region reduces drastically. And here we go. Earlier, almost the full screen was in pink. Now we are able to focus on very specific areas and find out what were those differences. A very small section of code was there, and you're able to see inside that code as well what are those differences. If I zoom out, you'll be able to see how small the code snippet was, but was able to find out the granular differences inside that as well. So these types of checks that is possible. Your test could be about a very simple functionality or just navigating through all the different screens that you have. But in that context, you will be able to do the full functional and visual validation to make sure everything is working fine. In addition, there are many other features that might be of value. For example, if you're doing A/B testing, and there are these two different screens that you are seeing, as a result of A/B testing, you could simply you can create up to 20 different variations of the same screen, and Applitools will automatically check which variation the screenshot matches against and do the comparison accordingly. And you see with this new variation, the test is passed. With the earlier variation, there were differences found. So A/B testing becomes a very powerful feature as well. Likewise, we also have accessibility testing, which is the feature we have is for contrast advisor, where given a screenshot that you have captured, based on WCAG level 2.0, 2.1, and level AA, you can choose the combination of these, and Applitools will be able to tell you how many contrast violations were there on the screen. I don't want A/B testing over here. How many contrast validations were there on the screen? You can hover over those differences, and you'll be able to see what was the contrast ratio that was seen on the screen. And I'm just going to reload this. What was the contrast differences that you see on the screen? What was the expected standard for that? So in this particular case, there are no violations. Oh, there are 38 violations. So you hover over this, you see actual contrast is 2.93, expected was 4.5. So this gives you a very early indication of, as your product is getting evolved, is it going to meet your expected standards or not? Very, very valuable thing. Last important functionality that I wanted to share with you, I mentioned about on the cross-browser testing. The way Applitool solves that problem is using the ultra-fast grid or the ultra-fast cloud. You run the test once on your machine. So in this particular case, if I group this by test name, you'll see that I have just two tests which I've run 9 times. One test is 9 times, second test is 10 times. But this has run on different browsers or viewport sizes or devices. And we don't need to really look very far. Even by these thumbnails, you can understand how the page is getting rendered differently in these different viewport sizes. What this indicates is, because of the responsive nature of our application that we build, the rendering is going to change based on how and where the page is being rendered by the user. So you want to do a true comparison based on the real combination that is there, that the user is using. So what Applitools does is it will run the test once based on the configuration you provide for different browsers and devices. It will automatically re-render the same screens on those browsers and devices, do the visual validation for you, and get the results back to your test as part of the same execution cycle. So now your test has run once, but the results that you are seeing is for all the different browser and device combinations. And that becomes a very powerful way to get the coverage from your execution. Now, what is also very important is to make decision making easier. We've got a lot of functionality, AI based capabilities in the dashboard itself that will help you take quick decisions on the results that you find. We've got self maintenance features over here in the dashboard. So in this case, though we ran the test on various different browsers and devices, viewport sizes, visual validation was done in all those cases. There were significant differences found, but if you inspect it closely using the AI features, you will see that they've been grouped into two buckets only. If you zoom in on this, I'm going to put this side by side and zoom in on the difference. You will see that the black logo has changed to a green. Maybe this is part of my rebranding activity. So this is the expected change. I'm going to do a thumbs up. I move to the next group of differences. Over here, I see that the logo is missing. In this particular case, I'm going to report this as a defect, that logo is missing. And at this point, I will just do a thumbs down and close. And with a few clicks, I've taken a decision on all the different results in my dashboard. So these are some very, very powerful capabilities that we have in Applitools that will make it easy for you to work or to get functional and visual validations done, make your testing much more streamlined, automation much more streamlined. You continue to use the same automation tools that you have, integrate Applitools with that, reduce your code, make your test more stable, get increased coverage, and not just increase coverage on that particular test, but increase scaled coverage across all your different browsers and devices. A great place to start is to look at the applitools.com/tutorials page, where you will see detailed tutorials for all the popular automation tools. And you dig in deep, you click on any of these, you'll be able to get sample code and get started with that as well very, very easily. So this is how Applitools solves, or the creator of Visual AI solves the challenges when it comes to functional and visual testing, and provides a very easy way for teams to truly get to CI/CD, reduce the manual activity that is going on. What this now means is we are adding the we are adding eyes to top of the pyramid. We are adding user experience validation, UX validation in form of automation to your pyramid, which gives you a lot of value in your execution cycle. It helps you shift left and prevent defects from leaking to production. So now your product quality is not just about all the different automation you're doing and the NFRs, it's also including user experience validations. So to summarize, it is very important to have a holistic quality strategy for your product. Think about the test pyramid. What are the different layers of the test pyramid that are applicable to your product? And how can you automate the best for each of those layers? You have to shift left to get quick feedback. and including visual validation, visual testing in your automation strategy is, in my opinion, a very, very important aspect of your test strategy going forward. If your product has business impact, has loss of revenue or brand credibility issues because of functional or visual issues, then you have to use visual AI as part of your strategy and get that early feedback, get the increased coverage and scaled feedback from your automation. There are some references. I will share the slides with you after the session in a day or so. And I hope this was insightful. It gave some background into why visual testing is important, what are the standard approaches of visual testing, and how visual AI can solve this problem for you. So, with that, Paul, I'm going to pause and let's see if we have time for questions.
Yeah, we've got about 10 minutes of time for some questions. So I've got a few of them listed over here. And let's see what I've got over here. Um, let's see. So, well, there's always the difficult one about costs and stuff. But there's Amonili Osader. I hope I got that close. He's asking, is there an open source to Apple Tools or a Visual AI?
Great question. So, there are a lot of open source tools as well from a visual testing perspective. Most of them, first of all, use pixel validation. That is one big challenge. The second aspect is I'm a huge proponent of open source, by the way, right? But in this one space, uh, the challenge of creating baselines, managing the baselines, maintaining them, updating the baselines as your product evolves is not a trivial activity. And this is where I think open source tools are still not going to are not able to solve the problem as effectively, especially if your product has got dynamic content, it is contextual, you want to run it across different browsers, viewport sizes, then open source tools will be a challenge for you. But there are alternatives if in case you do require.
I agree with you. One of the things I like about Tools is that they do have 5 different levels of validation, and all of them you went through on the demo. So if anyone is joining late, watch the video and go back and watch Anand go through those demos out there. The interesting thing about it is that with these 5 different levels, Tools by default runs at level 2. Level 1 is that pixel validation, and I believe they just have it in there just so you can see the differences between what pixel validation does and how it's really not as useful versus their second level where they're looking for more AI, smarter interactions in there on that to do the validations and find the items, find changes and differences. And even exclude areas saying, okay, this area I don't need to look at. Other areas are specifically need to get an eyeball
Yeah.
on.
There are some others that we didn't cover. I didn't have time to cover all of those, but there are aspects of floating region. If there's some expected change in the layout, right, within reason, then floating region can be a great algorithm to use as well. There might be cases where the colors you might not worry about, so you can ignore the color differences as well. So very interesting algorithms that can be used contextually in combination to get the best validations.
Okay. I do have, let's see, well, there was one question. Is this recorded from Amis? Amis, yes, it is recorded. So once this video is done, go right over to the YouTube channel. You can pick it up and watch all the way from the beginning. Thank you for asking that. Alexander Green out there It says these automation tools to a quasi company, do they have environment department restrictions? I'm not sure how to answer that one, but Anand?
Do they have environment department restrictions? I'm actually not sure what that question means
Yeah,
completely, Alexander. If you can expand on that a little bit.
yeah, Alex, we got a few minutes here, so if you can come up with a better, a little bit more descriptive of what you're asking there, we can definitely look at that.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. I'm trying to see if there's anything, and you see on your side as well. You can go through the questions.
Yeah, I'm going.
Looks like it's kind of like people are actually answering questions on stuff here. So
Yeah.
I'm looking for question marks.
To share how.
Anand, you brought up that point about the validations of localization with different languages, programming languages. That's actually something I'm looking at as a usefulness in our application, where we expect a certain area to be in a different language, but also some areas are supposed to stay in English, and they're like, keep it that way.
Yeah, it's
Um,
very interesting, right? The tool is so powerful, you still need a good visual test strategy. What is the type of product? What type of environments do you have? What type of control do you have in different environments? How much can you test early? What do you need to test in higher environments only? And it becomes very easy to choose this. The tool is the same, you're just having a different way to use it in all these scenarios, right? It's very interesting how different customers are using appli tools for all these different use cases.
Yeah. I think you mentioned also there's like the grid where you can run the tests against multiple environment setups and then see exactly what differences are there. Can you expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah. A simple example that I like to use is a typical cross browser testing strategy, right? If I have 100 tests automated, let's say using Cypress or Selenium or APM, any tool, if I want to run the same test on, let's say, different browsers, if I'm using Cypress or Selenium, I want to run the same 100 tests on four primary browsers, right? Edge, Safari, Firefox, Chrome. And there are three standard breakpoints when it comes to responsive design. So now immediately we've got 12 combinations that are important for me to test if my website is working well, just on the desktop browser. Now, what this means is I'm running the same 100 tests 12 times. That is 1200 tests that are going to execute. I need to analyze the results out of all of these. And most of the times, there will be some amount of flakiness, or tests might fail sporadically, randomly. You might need to rerun certain tests. So there's a lot of time that you need to run all these tests, look at the results, and make meaning out of it. Instead, if you use Apply tools, you are running the test only one time. So only 100 tests are going to run. If those 100 tests took 1 hour to execute, you will still run it in 1 hour plus a few minutes, but you will get the visual validation results along with that in that time for all the 12 combinations or even more. So you're getting more than 1200 test results in an hour, 10 minutes instead of 12 hours plus time, whatever is required. And that's a
Hopefully,
huge thing.
yeah. Hopefully, only like maybe 1% of it fails, so that we're looking at about 12 different defects. So that's, I
Absolutely.
mean, the scalability. Everyone always wants scalability, but when you start
Yeah,
thinking about how many test cases are you doing, uh, it can become a challenge if everything suddenly fails. And
correct.
usually, when everything fails, it means your password is expired. There's a little tip for you. All
Yeah.
right.
Now,
I think we're yeah. Go ahead, Anand.
sorry, there's one more thing over there, right? Talking about the scaling aspect. Recently, we've released a new product for native applications as well called the Native Mobile Grid. So the ultra-fast grid is for the web. The native mobile grid is for native applications. You run the test on one Android device, you get the feedback from all Android devices for the native applications automatically. Likewise for iOS as well. So it's again a great way to scale your testing shift left for native applications.
That sounds really cool. Now I gotta go play around with that. Um, maybe we got some. Maybe if you can dig up some links to videos on stuff like that, we could share that over onto our chat.
Absolutely.
And with that, Anand, again, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you and taking a look at Apple Tools and how it does the visual validation. It's a real thing, everybody. I always say that there's three companies out there that do visual validations. Their names are Apple Tools, Apple Tools, and Apple Tools. So everybody else is just pixel validation, and it's don't get all hooked into that. There are better and smarter ways to do it, and Apple Tools does a really great job at it. Anand, thank you again. I can't thank you enough for this.
Thank you for the opportunity, Paul. Thank you everyone for listening in. Again, looking forward to connect with you offline.
Sounds
Take care.
great. Thanks. Cheers. All right. So we've gotten through our halfway point over here. And just a reminder, I'm Paul Grossman, the Dark Arts Wizard. We are doing our 2-hour monthly Zappletech meeting where we are talking about test automation, all things test automation. And we are got some another speaker coming up over here. That is Mary Jo Zervas, and I can see her screen come over there. Hi, Mary Jo, how you doing?
Hi, Paul. How are you?
I am doing great. Hey, when I'm employed, I'm always happy, so that's a good thing. For those of you who don't know, Mary Jo and I actually worked together in test automation some 10 years ago, was it? Maybe 12?
Yes.
We worked for Redbox and had a lot of fun over there, a lot of great people. And I'll tell you the one thing about Redbox working at the tower over there that distinctly stuck in my mind was they were building the world's largest vending machine with refrigeration, and it was oh my gosh, it was as long as a hallway, and you could always go down there and grab a snack out of there. Made all sorts of different boxes and stuff. So that's my memories of Redbox. But let me get back over to you. Enough of my memories. Mary Jo, you're working these days in SpecFlow.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit. What now? When you say SpecFlow, it has something to do with Gherkin or Cucumber. Explain that to our audience. What is SpecFlow?
So, well, I'll get into that in my talk, but it's
Oh, okay.
basically it's a framework that you can put on top of Selenium to make natural language tests.
Okay.
In
And if I
instead of
remember
code.
correctly, the language you're working in is C#. Am I correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah. All right. At the very introduction, I said that if someone asks about SpecFlow, it's usually a hidden question. It's asking, what programming language do you work in? Is it C#? Is it Java? And if you know Cucumber and stuff like that. I'm going to say, without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mary Jo, and take it away.
All right. Let me. All right. Everyone can see my screen, hopefully. So like Paul said, yes, my name is Mary Jo Zervas. I'm a principal test engineer at a company called Paylocity, which I will get into a little bit what that is. And my talk today is just how we built an automation framework using SpecFlow for UI and API testing. So kind of the agenda for today, for the rest of the hour, is I just want to tell you a little bit about our automation story, kind of how we built the frameworks, and some of some of the reasons we picked SpecFlow, some of the common automation problems we encountered, how we solved them, and how we built the framework and a testing community of support here within my company, and the success stories we've gotten out of the automation. And we'll just finish up with some questions, and hopefully you can take something away from this, whether you're going to use this framework or not, but hopefully you can take something away from this to apply to your own automation back at your own companies. So I just want to give you a little background about my company that I work for, just to kind of level set who we are and the kind of environment we're doing test automation in. So we're an industry-leading cloud-based human capital management software company. We have web UI, APIs, mobile applications to test. There's approximately 500 employees, 800 of us in product development, and we're a fully remote culture. We were remote before the pandemic, and we've just continued that after the pandemic. Approximately 80 or so test engineers across 50 teams within product and tech. So a wide variety of talents, experiences, programming ability, automation experience in the company and across our test engineers. So I'm dating myself a little bit with a Golden Girls reference, but picture it, Arlington Heights, Illinois, summer of 2024. We had just done an Agile transformation, kind of going into an Agile software development methodology, and we wanted to include some automation in our testing, and we didn't have a tool. We were investigating tools, and so we came across SpecFlow and Selenium and thought it was a good fit. And so what were our goals for our automation initiatives? So we wanted to use Selenium for UI. Our applications, some of them were new greenfield applications, some of them are 20 years old. Our UIs were a little bit inconsistent with complex interactions, so we needed something that was highly customizable to our use cases. We wanted to make sure we had something that could access data and databases for setup, assertions, data cleanup, and we wanted to make something that was reusable with centralized logic for ease of maintenance. At the time when we started on this automation journey, I said a lot of our testing resources didn't have automation experience. So we wanted to adopt a framework that equally folks with less technical skills and less automation experience could still meaningfully contribute to, but also a framework that could grow with us as we got more experience in this area, and for resources that had already done automation, maybe in a different framework, or had some programming background, that they could find this interesting and useful on their teams as well. So kind of to answer questions, Paul's question from the top, what is SpecFlow? Excuse me. It's an open source .NET tool that integrates with Visual Studio and lets you write Cucumber compatible Gherkin syntax. I like to think of it, it's on top of Selenium. So it essentially is using Selenium. It's just putting this layer on top of it, of this Gherkin syntax to write your test scenarios. It has its own test runner, but you can also use MS Test, NUnit, XUnit, and others. And there is the URL you can go to learn more about it, specflow.org, getting started. Why we chose this? It seemed like a natural fit for us due to the technology. Where our applications are written in C#. All of our development resources are very proficient in C#. So let's utilize what we know, right? So we, because it's a C# framework, we're like, all right, this seems like a good fit. We're already using this technology. We already have the tooling. Most of us have Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. Let's keep on that train and use this. Like I said, we we wanted folks who hadn't been exposed to automation that were testing to be able to meaningfully contribute to this. So if they can write test cases in the natural language format, which is essentially just sentences, they can contribute to the automation even though they maybe don't know the ins and outs of Selenium or other more technical skills needed to write automation. It is completely customizable. So, and I don't want to misconstrue SpecFlow. You still have to write and tell the browser what to do. It doesn't have commands that are going to tell the browser exactly what to do. You're still having to write all that. But it just allows you to kind of decouple the scenarios in this natural language format that can represent your test cases, and then have code behind that that is actually controlling the browser. And then, we wanted to think about growth. This was almost 10 years ago that we started this, and we're still using this framework today because it was able to grow with us. As we went to more API based applications, we've been able to kind of tweak our keywords that once were UI based, and now we've been able to make them API based. So it was a scenario that could, or a framework that could grow with us as we changed the applications. So just kind of a timeline of our project. So like I said, we started using this summer of 2024. Excuse me, I have a little cold today. We established one team started using this in summer of 2024. And so part of our Agile methodology, we demo every 2 weeks, every team. So that team just started to show in our sprint demos, here's this cool automation we wrote, here's this cool framework that we're using. And kind of word of mouth, a grassroots effort got established, and more teams like, hey, what is this SpecFlow thing? How could we use it? Could you help us? And so, soon we had a core group of teams using the framework and helping other teams adopt it. So we kind of, naturally grassroots founded this internal SpecFlow community, and that was this, about 2016 is when that kind of solidified itself. May of 2027, we reached a milestone. We had cake. It was great, where we reached 1,000 regression tests in the framework of our largest application. So that was an exciting milestone for us. Then teams started incorporating these tests into their CI/CD pipeline, started using them to sign off for deployments, really reduced the time people had to be on off hours dealing with, having to sign off on deployments. So that was another big win. And then, like I said, as we moved to more API-based development, we started to integrate API keywords into the framework. We built a cross-team dashboard that's outside of Selenium and SpecFlow. Just wanted to point it out that, we did other things in our automation journey besides just using SpecFlow. And, today we got about 20 plus applications and APIs automated using the framework that we built. So it's been a pretty successful past almost 10 years using this. So what is needed for UI automation in SpecFlow? I like to think of it as 4 layers. So you need the feature file. This is what is actually defining your test. This is where you put this gherkin, these natural language keyword test scenarios. Then you've got the actual code of the keywords. So it telling the browser what to do. Open Chrome, log in, hit this button, go to this page. Those are the kind of things you'll see in there. Plus page models. We use the page model object design pattern. So we've got all our pages in our application and their locators. And then it essentially sits on Selenium. So you're using Selenium commands, and Selenium's controlling the browser. And then you've got your application that you're testing, or your API. So kind of those 4 layers are what goes into a framework that would be using SpecFlow. So just kind of wanted to show an example. So this up here in the top left, this is what a feature file would look like. So you have your scenario, you've got your gherkin, and I'm going to go into this in a little more detail as we progress in this. And then on the right here, this is, so for, I select, text from a dropdown. So I select yes from a dropdown. That's what I put in my test feature. And behind that then is code that says, get the dropdown I have indicated in this page model, because I'm on a page, and select the yes, select this value by text, value yes. So that's the code that is behind that keyword that is going to be executed against the browser. And you've entered text into a text field. So again, enter text. I'm finding the elements on the page, and I'm clearing its input, and then I'm sending keys the text that I entered here, B123, 132. And then I'm doing an assertion. Then the search results are these 4 IDs. And so I'm doing an assertion on that. Again, it's going to the page. It's looking at the table that's got generated on the page, and it's making sure that all the IDs in the table match what I've put here in the test. So this part here in the top left and this here on the right are the 2 pieces that you as an implementer of a spec flow framework would be writing. You'd be writing this feature file and these keyword definitions and interactions here. Then this on the bottom right is what is auto-generated by the spec flow framework itself. And that is essentially linking these 2 things together. So let me kind of go to the next slide and show you that a bit more. So here's your feature up here. Here are the keywords that you have written. And when you put in these specific syntaxes that you're binding them, you're given when then, a scope, then SpecFlow takes all that and auto-generates a feature.cs file that kind of ties all that together with its framework. So you can, say, I only want this keyword to be able to be used in this feature and give it a feature name. I only want a specific keyword to be used in a given clause of Gherkin or a when clause. You can define all of that when you write the framework, and then SpecFlow will handle all of that mapping for you. So go into a little bit more detail about a feature file. So first thing is its name. So it's always going to have a feature keyword with a name. So locations, in this example. It's just a unique name to identify the feature. So we use, you kind of map that to, a requirement, essentially. You can call it, but you can call it whatever you want. It's free text. The background. The background clause is for set of commands that would be executed before every scenario in the feature file. So it is good to use for actions that would be common to all test scenarios in your feature file. It's not required, but it's a way kind of to save typing and to keep your files more organized. So if you have a set, right, every UI test, you're going to log in pretty much. So put your login steps in the background, put some common navigation steps in the background, set any variables that you would be using for all the scenarios in the background. Then you only have to type that out once, and it'll be executed before every scenario. Then you've got your actual test scenario. So again, it needs a name. That's what goes on this first line. That can be anything, free-form text. So you want to give it something meaningful, so you know what it is, because that is what you'll see in your test runner. So want something easy to identify your test. And then it contains the actions that you want to do in your test. So this particular test, I'm going to go to the company locations add page, and I'm going to save. So I'm not going to. So this is a test that's testing that required field messages show up. So I'm going to go to the add page. I'm going to save it without entering anything, and I want to make sure that I receive the appropriate validation messages, that the address 1 is required and that the city is required. For those not familiar with Gherkin, I like, for best practices with Gherkin, I like to think of the given as your set of preconditions. So the things that you're going to do before you get to the actual thing you're testing. So, I'm going to this page, I'm entering these fields, whatever preconditions you're doing for your test. The when is your action. I'm clicking the save button. I like to keep the when as specific as possible. So I'm testing the save button here. So that is my when. And then the then are your validations. In this case, I'm making sure I'm validating these 2 error messages are displayed. And you can chain multiple keywords together in a clause. I lost my cursor, there it is, with the and. So give all these, like in the background here, all these lines and, they're part of the given. So they're part of the preconditions. In this case, I have 2 validations because I have 2 error messages I want to check. So then, and then an and, which is also part of the then. Final thing that is in this feature file anyway are some tags. They always start with the @ symbol. And again, these are user defined. So for, you define these as you see fit. They're a way to group and organize scenarios together. So we kind of do them, like, okay, all our regression tests have this regression medal tag on them. Oh, this is a company test because it's in the company space. We have some specific database thread tags just to kind of control database contention. And then we have some feature toggle thing. And those things are kind of specific to my company. So only run this test if this toggle is off, because if it's on, the application does something else. So tags are a way to just kind of organize and flow control your tests based on certain environments or certain feature toggles, or any other categorization that you could come up with. SpecFlow also has a specific one, @ignore, which would skip a test. So if it's kind of like a work in progress or something, then you can use the @ignore tag, and that won't run when you run those tests. Here's another way to write a feature file in a scenario. You can do a scenario outline. And that is for when you have a situation where you have steps that you want to do different inputs for, but it's the same steps over and over. So in this case, like this is a test to check for invalid social security number formats. So, I could think of a lot of invalid social security number formats. Here's just an example of 5. So in this case, I'm going to a specific employee, I want to add dependents, I'm giving it a last name and first name, and then I want to add an invalid social security number, save it, and make sure I get the validation error that it has to be in a valid format. So the way I do that is I write the scenario just like I would any scenario, but I use the scenario outline identifier instead. And then I'm going to have this link between this little token with the caret bracket symbols and these examples, so that those names have to match there. And so every time, this is going to run 5 times, and every time it'll pick the first one, throw it in there, pick this one next, throw it in there, then that one, and I should get an invalid message on each one. So it's essentially running this scenario 5 times with 5 different inputs and making sure they're all invalid. So without the scenario outline, I would have to write a scenario for each one individually. Again, this saves you time, saves you typing, and it makes your test a little bit more organized. So a page model, probably most of us on the call are familiar with the page model design pattern, but this is just the definition of all of the elements on the page that you want to interact with. So IDs, names, XPaths, CSS selectors, just a couple of ways that you can use to identify the elements. You can also have multiple selectors on an element and prioritize them. So this is good for, if you're changing the UI, but it hasn't been deployed to all environments yet, you can have this multiple selector with the priority, and hopefully tests that run across, multiple environments will still pass because it's looking for either one. And so if it doesn't find it using priority 0, it'll go into priority 1. Hopefully you'll find it that way. Again, just our best practices that we did, we organized our keywords into 3 packages. We had a NuGet package for UI keywords, a NuGet package for API keywords, and then a NuGet package for common keywords. This is how we kept things organized. And so for teams that were only doing UI tests, they could just pull in the UI keywords package. So we had things in there like entering text into fields, how to acknowledge and dismiss dialog boxes, select and validate rows and columns from a grid. Anything that was a UI-based interaction went into our UI keywords. Our API keywords, similarly, send a request to an API, retrieve and validate responses, check headers, set request bodies. All of those were an API keyword package. Common keywords were things like database interactions, updating tables, selecting from tables, validating things got inserted into tables, anything around variables. we organized into that common keywords package. One of our goals was, to kind of keep the front end implementation out of the test. We didn't want in our feature files to have to write things like put this text into this React field or put this text into this Angular field. We didn't care what the front end was written in. React, Angular, some of our older applications are in web forms. So we just made a generic keyword called when I set field to value. We didn't even care what type of field it was. Text field, drop down, checkbox, radio button. We didn't want the tester who's creating the test scenarios to have to know that. So we had a generic set keyword that we created, and then it was up to whoever was writing the page model to put specific information about the kind of field it was. So in this case, a web element hint. This is a drop down. It's earnings type is a drop down. So that went into the page model, not the actual test itself. And again, that just helped our less technical resources kind of get used to writing tests and not have to worry about the implementation of the actual application. So yeah, the fields of value. One of our personal biggest challenges was test data management. We are a very heavy data company, being in human capital management and payroll and lots of data. So we created a keyword, again, totally custom to our framework, called a data snapshot. And what it did was you gave it a table and some criteria, and it saved off the current state of that database table. And then you run your test, and at the end, it cleaned up whatever you did. So like if I ran this data snapshot on a say an employees table, so I'm like because my test was going to add a new employee. And so I'm like, all right, save off the employee table and ran my test. And then at the end of the test, it would essentially in the background get rid of that, delete that employee that I just added. So, right, test data management is just in automation in general is a very critical part of making sure that you're starting with a known data state every time you run the test. So this was our solution to it, this data snapshot keyword that we created. And it would clean up whether the task passed or failed. So we were never leaving like half entered data in the database. You know, that might be screw up tests the next time it ran. So whether you use this kind of concept or a different concept, figure out a way to handle your test data, because that's very critical in automation. All right, then some other things that we put in our framework, variables and configuration files. So you can define a variable a couple of ways. You can pull it from, so this syntax we came up with, this would pull this value from a configuration file. So the key is DW testing, and I'm pulling the company value. So 14665. So when this test ran, it would basically replace this token with that value. And this one is just a hard-coded variable, and I set a polling time variable of 5,000. So that's just hard-coded into the test. And then if I use it here, so I'm using this company variable now, we came up with this double percent sign. I'm like, what is that symbol? Percent sign syntax. So that would essentially, again, replace this token with the value that I pulled in from the configuration file. So this way, again, we could use configuration files per environment. You know, maybe in the first QA environment, there was a company that had a company number 14665. But when I got to our staging QA environment, I don't know, for whatever reason, it didn't have that company. So its configuration file could have a different company value in there for this key. And then we could use the same tests on different environments because it was pulling it from a configuration file. Page loading, again, might be a specific problem to our applications, but because we have, you know, like I said, older applications written in older technology and some newer ones, we had different page kind of wait icons. So wait for the page, wait, loading data. We had these little bubbles. We have this like progress bar. So we had to come up with a way to, again, we didn't want the tester, the person writing the test scenario necessarily to know which of these page loading elements they're going to encounter. So we, again, put that in a configuration file. We just used the CSS selectors of each of these, stuck them in a configuration file, and made sure our pages would wait for any of them. So the person writing the test didn't have to know which particular implementation of the wait class a page was using. Working with grids, another common challenge in automation. You don't ever want to assume that the grid is going to be ordered the same way every time the test runs, right? You know, I've got an alphabetical by last name employee grid here, but if I add another name, then all these are going to shift down. So this con here is not going to be in row 3. Next time I run the test, maybe it'll be in row 4 because some other team added some test data to a shared environment. So we implemented a grid keywords that would essentially search the grid based on criteria. Excuse me again. So that was part of the page model definition, that it has this grid. And again, within the page model was the type of grid. This happened to be a Kendo implemented grid. And it's max you can, again, all specific to some things we were trying to solve. You know, how many pages am I going to search? I'm going to search through 5 pages. If I can't find it in 5 pages, then the test will fail. Am I going to search forward or backwards? We could put all those things on there. And all the person writing the test scenario had to do is say, I want to find this last name from this grid for employee ID. You know, it had to have some key to search on, employee ID 21. So for employee ID 21, I want to make sure the last name is Jones, but I don't care what row that's in. I just want to find it and make sure it's in the grid. So that's how we solved that common automation challenge. Like I said, one of the reasons we picked this framework to use is because we could completely customize it, right? You're building everything in the framework. You're building the test. You're building the code behind the test. So while most of our keywords are common interactions you would have with the browser, I click this button, I enter this in this field, I navigate to this page, I make sure this field has this value. Teams got really creative. You know, we could build keywords that did multiple steps in data setup within a single keyword. So like an example, I calculate the sum of the year-to-date data for year-to-date, 2021 for this company and this employee and this code group, and I assign it to that variable. So that's under the covers, right, is going to do a ton of stuff. But again, the point or the thing we were trying to solve is the person writing the test case knows that you have to set up all of that information, right? Like to test whatever scenario this is testing, I need to have an employee in a company in this particular code group with this year-to-date data. But maybe they don't know how to do that because they're new to the company or they don't know what tables that are in. We endeavored to try to make the automation framework so robust that it had a keyword that's like, here, this is going to set this up for you. Just tell me what company and employee ID and what year you want it in, and we will set that up. So all they have to do is drop this keyword into a test, and all that gets done for them behind the scenes. Another thing that SpecFlow gives you is hooks. So you can they have specific bindings and specific keywords that will be before and after scenarios or before and after features that you can execute code in. So, and again, that solves, that allows you not to have to put those specific steps as part of the test. It's just kind of an automatic hook that happens after the test. So an example of this would be a deleting the employee after you run an add employee test. Again, you want to clean that up. You don't want that employee sitting out there run to run. So you just put those commands in a after hook to delete the employee that you just added. And it'll automatically be run whether the test passed or failed, cleans up your data, and it doesn't have to be part of the test definition itself. Oh, I have a video. All right, hold on. Let me see if I can get this to work. Hopefully this is coming through. Okay, so on the left here is our actual automation code. On the right here is our application. So I'm just kind of going to talk you through as this is going. So it's logged in, and now it is navigating to a particular company. So it's ran this login step. Now it's doing this navigation into a company. I am going to a new employee add page, and I'm unchecking this checkbox. I'm adding first name, last name. I'm giving it a random social security number. I'm selecting these drop downs that are required to anything because I don't care what they are. And I'm saving. It's a little waiting. And now I'm checking that the new employee record message is up there. Receive the info summary message, new employee record. And you see, I have no code in the test anymore, but it's still doing stuff. That's one of those hooks that I was saying. So you don't have to put the hook in your code. but I'm cleaning up the employee I just added now in an after hook. But there's no actual code in the test itself for that. Okay, I think that was it. So a little about API testing. Really, it's the same concept. You're still using scenarios, feature files, keywords. We just defined more API specific keywords. So again, I'm using variables, which I used in the UI tests. And now I just have some keywords that are specific to APIs, like I get this resource. So here's my API endpoint. And when I send that get request, I'm expecting a 200 back. This is just a log message. I write the response to the console. And in this particular one, I'm verifying that the response is the same content as the SQL query. Like I said, my company is very data heavy. So we found a tool like Postman, for example, not to knock Postman. I love Postman for manual testing. But it can't validate against a database. So for automated tests, we really wanted to be able to validate our responses from APIs against what's actually in the database. And so SpecFlow allowed us to do that. And, it was just a common or a natural extension of what we'd already built for the UI. We were able to reuse some of the keywords we'd already built, and then we just built additional API-specific keywords for authentication tokens, building request bodies, sending the requests, validating the response, the statuses, other headers. And because everything was in the same framework, it allowed us to combine, hybrid tests of UI and API actions into one test. So now we could do like maybe some data setup in the UI, then run the API or use the API to clean something up that we did in the UI. So opened up a lot of possibilities because everything was in the same framework. Kind of to talk about our community that we have internal to our company. So, we encourage contribution to this framework. The framework is owned by kind of a tools team that also kind of manages our load test framework and some other test frameworks, but anybody can contribute to it if they have an idea. We established a committers group that reviews PRs that consists of some software engineers, some QA engineers. And so, we just, that group is really just reviewing PRs to make sure that things are adhering to our coding standards, that, it wouldn't break anything for anybody. And that's worked out really well for us. Our tests have tests. So, right, automation is just a programming initiative, an effort. So you should test your tests. So we have unit tests in our framework to make sure that if changes are made, we haven't broken any of the keywords. And like I said, we have defined and documented coding standards that we try to adhere to for this. We have a framework starter package that kind of helps teams spin up a new automation project. So it has examples in there of some simple interactions and actions you can do in a UI or an API to help teams get started. And we have a large wiki space for documentation, getting started guide, troubleshooting articles, keyword libraries with all examples of how to use them, video libraries of some of our community of practice meetups. We have Slack channels. I think that's on the next screen. We've dedicated Slack channels where anyone could ask questions. We have bi-weekly community of practice automation meetups. So lots goes into maintaining this because, right, it is a development effort, automation. Some success stories that we have had. So most teams are running these tests minimum daily. Some run after every deployment, some run after every build. So that continuous feedback has been really important and really has helped the quality of our applications to get that fast feedback from automation, which is one of the goals. previously, before we kind of had automation in place, we had to wait until it got to a QA environment, then someone had to manually test it, and that could be, what if the deployment failed, and then you lost a whole day. So this has really improved our fast feedback. We're catching bugs earlier in the development process because of that feedback. Daily automation runs for our largest project probably has caught over 150 defects in QA, and maybe we wouldn't have caught all those manually. It's a large that's a large application that we have. So having daily automation regression run for that project has been a godsend in helping us find things early in the development process and saving us time. And one of the goals of automation is to free up your manual resources to do more exploratory testing. My philosophy, automation isn't the be-all end-all of quality. It is one tool in your tool belt of quality. But automation is, right, you're programming what your test is doing. It's going to do no more or no less than what you've told it to do. So if you've got all that in there with your basic happy path and negative scenarios, then your actual human resources can spend more time doing, well, what if I did this button in this order and then went to this screen and closed the browser? All these weird edge case scenarios that are hard to automate, or wacky things you think your end users might do, or just anything else you can think of to break the system, right? And that's, I think, really one of the benefits of automation is you're automating all the easy stuff, the easily repeatable, boring stuff, and you're letting your human resources do the more fun, what if I do this type of testing, crazy stuff. And it let us got more sleep, as I like to say in this slide. We deploy a lot, and prior to automation, we did validation and production. Things deployed, and a bunch of people would get online and make sure everything was still working. And because of the nature of our business, most of our deployments are off hours. And so with automation, we can just have the tests validate what we're doing, and all of us can go to sleep. Clearly, if a test failed or something, someone gets paged, and we'd have to go figure out what was wrong with that during a deployment. But it has greatly improved our deployment resource need to have less of us online after hours. So wrapping up here, I think SpecFlow is a great tool if you desire to implement a keyword framework in C#. It worked out very well for us because it allowed our resources who were kind of a little bit scared of automation to meaningfully contribute, because they started out writing those feature files, which is essentially a test case in English or whatever, in natural language. And that's what they're good at, right? Manual testers are really good at coming up with test scenarios. So they're writing the test scenarios, and they're easily understood. I could give the test scenario to our product owner and say, this is what I'm planning to test. What do you think I'm missing? And they're not slogging through code. They're just reading a document. Treat automation like a development project, because it is one. It's code. So use the same standards that you're using for your actual application development in your automation development. And cultivate a thriving community to share tips and tricks. I think that is one of the reasons why we were so successful at this, is because we are just very collaborative and shared between teams and shared the cool things that we were doing. And I know a lot of, you can find a lot of these communities outside a company too. So utilize the resources of the internet to find those as well. So I think that is it, Paul. I will take some questions. Here's some of my contact info. I'm old school, not on Twitter or anything, but you can find me on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mary Jo.
My camera's over here.
Yes.
In the camera.
I had that issue too, and today I've got 3 computers over here, so I never know which one I'm looking at. So,
Put it over
so
here
we
so I
really
can
didn't
see
have a
you.
whole lot of questions on there, except for some guy named Paul Grossman who had a question out there.
Yeah.
So,
So it will only execute the. I can't remember if I'll be honest. I can't remember if this is configurable or not in the framework. I know the way we have it set up is it will, if it fails the first validation, the first then, it will stop the test and will
okay,
not do the other ones.
okay,
That
that's
might be configurable, and I apologize for not remembering. I can look that up and get back to you.
I think it is. I think it would be configurable on that. That's one of the major things I look for in all different frameworks. Is if I'm doing 10 validations and the first one fails, I want to know what the other ones are.
Right.
I don't want to just okay. I fixed the first one. Now what about the other? Oh, I had 3 other ones that are in there. I liked a lot of the stuff that you brought up. One thing that you mentioned is it's an automation is a development project, and we should be following the same processes that we have in there. One thing that I always try and compare is the developers to the STETs, and is do the developers have administrative access on their systems?
They
And if
do.
they have it, I always go like my STETs get it too. That's
Yep.
it's not that's one of the most important things I do out there. Is there anything that you look at that you could expand on, like to make sure that you're really seen as a development project?
So, like kind of we actually had to fight that battle at my company about the admin access for SDETs versus developers, and we did fight that, and we won because yes, we're like we need the same tooling, we need the same exact tooling and permissions because we are automation developers, and so we did make that case and won that. Um, and we implemented a lot of the same controls on our automation repository that the developers had. When you do a commit, you've got to have a JIRA card in the commit message to check in. We've got a couple, like I said, unit tests. We made sure we're implementing unit tests in the framework, and those are required on the PR. So, we did take a lot from our developer friends and what they're doing with the actual application and their development process, and brought that into the automation framework process, and how we handle that. And so, yeah, I think that's an excellent. It's an excellent point. It's the same skill set, just like 2 different. What am I trying to say? Just views of it.
Yep.
They're building applications that clients are using. We're still building an application. Our users just happen to be internal and other testers.
I also noticed that on one of your slides you said you got to a one milestone, which was 1,000 test cases getting executed. Can you tell us a little bit about like how do you deal with the more test cases we get, the longer it takes to complete all those test cases? What do you do to make sure that we can get results in the shortest amount of time?
Yep. So you can do threading in SpecFlow. So we run the tests on, I think it's like 4 or 5 threads. So they do run in parallel. One of the things, and in one of my slides was that little database tag, and that's how we did, as we upped the threads, we noticed contention in the database as tests were trying to access like the same tables or something. So we did kind of artificially group them by like, okay, if you're doing an employee test, because we all know that's always going to be in these set of tables, we want to do that like on a dedicated employee test thread. And if you're doing a company test, you want to do that in a dedicated company test thread. So we kind of artificially controlled our threads that way. But you could, you can just have like, give me 5 threads. Here's a set of tests. I want to run them against 5 threads, and SpecFlow will just distribute them for you however you want. If you don't need that kind of granular control that we realized that we needed.
Cool. I
And again, it's
liked.
just Selenium, right?
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, Paul.
No, it's
This
fine.
is just Selenium under the hood. So a lot of the other Selenium tools that are out there, Selenium Grid, and even what Anand showed about applet tools that you can plug into Selenium. You could use all that within this framework. You could build it in. We haven't yet on some of that, but it really just is Selenium under the hood.
I noticed something that I had not seen in the years I've been working, which was you had multiple locators for a particular element,
Yep.
level 1, level 0, level 1, stuff like that. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, the problem that we're trying to solve with that is our deployment pipeline is a set of several environments before it hits production, and not, we're working on doing that faster, not going to lie, but sometimes there could be a week delay between QA environment 1 and QA environment staging, for example. And so if you have you're running tests in both environments, and maybe the new UI hasn't made it to that second environment yet, so you don't want the test to fail just because it can't find something because it's running an older version. So that's why we implemented the priority locator thing.
I like that because that is the first time I've seen that implemented that way. I usually put in some sort of smart code in there. It says, like, if you didn't find it this way, try it this way. Never thought about trying to set it up as two different locators to go find an element. So really smart on your guys' side. Oh, I wanted to get back to that 1,000 test case. Yeah, we talked about getting it to run in multi-threads. Do you divide your test cases up into GUI and API? And do you is there anything is there a smoke test that starts out with a percentage of stuff? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so again, we just use those tags. So our goal was to have, one repository of tests that could be used for multiple purposes, and that's why we use the tags. So yeah, you can, out of those 1,000 tests, maybe 20 of them are tagged with smoke, and when we, in our CI/CD tool, we happen to use TeamCity. So when we are running our smoke tests in there, we just say, just run the smoke test. So it's still pulling from the same repository of tests, but now it's only running the ones tagged smoke. Or, it's only running the API ones. We'll put API tags on something. So we use the tagging for that. So we don't have multiple, we don't have a repository that has smoke tests and then a repository over here that has regression tests. No, everything's in one repository, and the tagging controls what tests are run.
I also like the fact that you pointed out early in the presentation about the token replacement, where you had the I think it was the 2% signs,
Yep.
Identifying of an element of that is getting replaced. Usually, I do that with it's just a date, and then you can increase the date or backdate it and have it replace on that. What other examples did you use for the token replacement?
Yeah, dates is a great one. We have that. We'll have there's a keyword in our framework like give me today's date. I don't remember the exact syntax, but it'll be today or yesterday or the day before, or give me a variable today plus 10 days. So we use dates a lot in token replacement, which is a great example. But yeah, anything like I said, we, in the presentation, because our different QA environments have different data on them, we do a lot with config files and token replacement that way. So we'll pull a value from a config file that's specific to that environment and then use that value in the rest of the tests where we've identified the tokens. Just because our QA environments are just slightly different with the data. And again, reusability, we want to use the same tests in every environment and not have to make environment specific tests.
Yep. I also noticed that you did touch on the first thing that I've always been a little weary with Gherkin and Cucumber is the way the data is handled and putting it actually in the test and having it run out of that. And you did mention about you set up I think a connection that you can go and just pull the data directly from the data from a database source.
Mhm.
That is that like one of the first things you had to address as a challenge is
That was in the top. Yeah, it's the nature of our application and the way our test environments are is sometimes it's easier to go look for the data you need instead of to create the data you need. Um, so we did put that in fairly early, just keywords like I want an employee that is paid hourly, or I want an employee that is from Wisconsin, something specific to a payroll scenario that, we need a certain setup of employee for. And uh, you could do that all in a test, right? You could set up all of your test data within a test. And for small things, I think that is probably the proper way to do it, because you want your test to not be so dependent on, you want your test to use the data it's creating, I think, ideally. But sometimes that's not practical. If I had to set up some of these more complex scenarios every time the test run, that would triple the runtime of a test sometimes. So looking for the data, just go to the database, find me an employee in Wisconsin, and I'm going to use that in my test.
yeah,
And so, yeah,
just
that was kind of early on in the framework development, we realized that was a need.
yeah, and we just came across one of our first items, which is cleanup. We're creating these tabs, and we're like, okay, now we get about 30 or 40 of these tabs. We got to go add the cleanup in there. Cleanup's like it's almost something that it's almost as an afterthought on most projects. But Mary Jo, you've hit every single item out there. I think everyone who's been listening here is. You really open up all the challenges. Automation, as I like to say, is easier said than done because you don't know what these extra things are. You've covered a lot of those topics. You obviously are uh, a pro in your field. Um, I appreciate everything that you've done here on this presentation. It's been very insightful. Any final words before we wrap this up?
No, thanks for having me. Like I said, hopefully people took away something, even if they're not using this particular framework, something that was useful for automation in general, because I think the concepts of automation are universal. Frameworks might differ, but concepts are universal.
Absolutely. Cool. Mary Jo, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. We have to catch up one of these days. We're almost in the same neighborhood, so
Yeah,
we should go, have some fun or do something, at Pinstripes or something
sounds
like that. I
good.
don't know. Haven't been there in a while. All right. I'm going to say thanks to Mary Jo again, and I'm going to get to the wrap up here. Guess what? We have more of these coming up over here. Next month, we are going to have if you miss Larry Goddard, Larry is going to be the host for next month's meeting. And I've got, I think I found somebody who's going to be really special for him to chit chat with. I'm going to say again, thank you to Zappeltech for continuing to host these. It's been my pleasure to be here and have fun and give you more and more knowledge about all the different ways you can do test automation. I'm always crazy about it, so I love chit-chatting with it. I'm going to hope everybody had a great Valentine's Day, and we'll see you next month. Take care. I'm Paul Grossman, the Dark Arts Wizard, and have yourself a great day. Bye. Cheers.